Thank you, Treva. Thanks everyone for coming. I thought there would be no one here. I thought it'd be July annual leave, but thank you. You're very kind for coming. So I've been giving lectures in this college for nearly 20 years at this stage, and I've stood in this spot and given the Hennessy Symposium about 15 years ago. And it was about the thalidomide survivors. It was the 50th anniversary of thalidomide. It was a really great session. I think Olivia O'Leary gave a speech as well. It was fascinating. But I never really thought I'd be giving this talk from the patient's perspective. And I suppose we all become a patient at some point in our lives. And my experience started the day after this photo was taken. So this was Christmas Day 2001. But we won't start there yet. We'll come back to that. We need to go back a little bit to the 90s. So the early 1990s, I call it. The late 1900s, my children call it. So I was 12 and Nirvana's Nevermind was #1 in the charts. And me and my friends were listening to Rage Against the Machine. I'm from Tuam, and the Saw Doctors N17 was at #1 for, I think, 17 weeks or more. It was a long-running #1. At that time, our English teacher in St. Jarlath's College in Tuam, Noel Gilligan, gave us all this Wordsworth's classic cheap copy of Dracula. And I suppose my fascination with Bram Stoker and with Dracula began at this time. I still have this book at home. And if we fast forward about 20 years from then to about 2012, I'm out in a share with some friends, and I'm pitching an outline to them of some historical fiction that I want to write that involves the Stoker family. And I then went into years of research phase, world building, stuck in the research phase, some writing, but a lot more research. And there were delays, loss of family members over that time, small children, new jobs with big workloads and big demanding projects. And then COVID came along, and then there was a cyber attack on the HSC, and then waking up one morning with my ability to hear changed forever. So if we go back to that picture, I was, if we go back to that picture, that was Christmas Day 2021, and a few hours later, myself and my daughter Shauna, who's up there, we played In the Bleak Midwinter. She was on piano, I was on guitar. That was the last song I played in stereo, and then The Royal Family was on, and the Oasis song Half the World Away was on as a theme song. That was the last song I heard in stereo. So, you don't think these things are going to happen to you. And I had a pretty poor awareness of sudden sensorineural hearing loss. So this is the first advocacy pause where I get across, what needs to be done with this condition. It happens to about 1,000 people in Ireland every year. Not everyone gets it as severe as me. A lot of people spontaneously resolve. But essentially, you need to get to an ENT specialist immediately. If you get steroids within 24 to 48 hours, there's a higher chance of recovery. I was misdiagnosed initially. The initial doctor that I saw treated me for a middle ear infection. It was about a week before I saw an ENT specialist, and sadly, then at that stage, I didn't have resolution of the condition. I won't go through the detail of the treatments. Lots of steroids, hyperbaric oxygen treatment down in Galway, where I was initially diagnosed and saw the ENT service there. Middle ear injections. Unfortunately, none of them worked, and we'll focus on Gibbet Hill instead. So skipping forward a few months then, I wrote a lot about that time and the challenges of living with severe tinnitus, challenges of going back to work with reduced ability to hear. You still have one good ear was something I heard from a few people, the minority, but a lot of people didn't realize the impact of that sudden change in your ability to hear and communicate with the world. I remember thinking at the time, all of these spiroform images, all these kind of snail images that I collect wherever I go, and they're kind of motif for the blog. I, at the time, was thinking about that little snail-shaped hearing miracle inside all of our heads. It's about the size of a pea, and mine was no longer working. And what happened to it? What had happened to the other ear? Was it genetic? And it was just a significant event in my life. So I wrote it all down. I felt that this was very therapeutic. Therapeutic writing is a known thing. So I described, that initial experience of waking up with the hearing loss, going through treatment, spending a significant amount of time in a hyperbaric chamber down in Galway, and moving on then to the get out there and live stage where, life goes on and you need to adjust to it and get used to it. And then just describing a day in the life, what it's like to walk around saying sorry all the time because I can't hear you, what it's like to get to the end of the day and you've excruciating tinnitus that's gotten louder and louder as the day went on. And documenting it helped, and focusing on the tinnitus and sharing my experience of it. And this blog's at about 16,000 views at this stage. There's a lot of people with these kind of situations, and I felt I wanted that detail myself, and I may as well write it down because it's a way of explaining it to myself. And then the whole seeking silence. So I could function at work. I had this severe tinnitus in the background. I could get myself into a good position. On the ward round in our neonatal unit, if I position myself right, it's fine. I'm not missing anything. But there's a lot of cognitive fatigue and auditory fatigue with trying to parse the conversation and trying to hear it all. And you get home in the evening, you've nothing left in the battery. Step back to a 4-day week, anticipated significant reduction in, my quantity or volume of work or quality of my work over, the rest of my 20-25 years working in the health system. And to be honest, I set to trying to see, was there some kind of solution that would deal with the tinnitus and give me better hearing experience. So I systematically searched the literature, the PubMed search that I used, and I looked at the evidence base for interventions for hearing loss, for single-sided deafness, and for tinnitus among that population. And CI's cochlear implants had a reasonably good evidence base that had emerged in the previous 10 years, starting in Belgium, spreading through a range of European and international settings, where they'd given cochlear implants to people with single-sided deafness, and where the majority seemed to have a significant reduction in their tinnitus while they wore the CI. So I wrote up an evidence summary of this little systematic review, and I started looking into the HSE treatment abroad scheme. And while I was at the Willie Clancy Festival in 2022, just seeing how loud I could make my tinnitus, I submitted my application. There's a few other things that drove it. I could hear hesitancy in my speech. I could feel my vocabulary shrinking. So I was thinking about that long-term effect of, reduced socialization or isolation or reduced ability to hear. And we had family experience of semantic dementia. So my father-in-law died from semantic dementia, which is loss of words, essentially. So there's a lot of driving force behind trying to find the best solution to this situation. And I was looking at a very good support around me. So that application got sent off during the Willie Clancy Festival, and I didn't expect much. But this is an excerpt from the blog with the response that I received a few days later. So yeah, my wife was shopping in Super Value, and I phoned her and said, been approved, by some champagne and some expletives, and everyone around her here, there's everyone in the car here, but I was approved. I had engaged with Charité in Berlin, who were one of the centres who published some of that research. And to be honest with you, they were the first health professionals who said loudly and clearly, we can help you. There's something that can be done in this situation. Up to that, it was, your hearing has changed, you're going to get used to it. So after isolating for a few weeks, there was a lot of COVID around at this time. You can't fly after cochlear implant surgery, so I had to drive over to Berlin. I set off on my own and got across and tried to avoid as many people as possible, because if I had a positive COVID test when I got there, no surgery. But thankfully the surgery happened, and to be honest with you, the activation and the subsequent experience of auditory rehabilitation was successful beyond my wildest dreams. So me and Roisin over in Berlin on the day of activation. And I suppose this is my second advocacy pause in the talk, and I will get to Bram Stoker. So people who need and want a cochlear implant should be able to access one. They should be able to receive them without impediments. There's about 10 people going through the treatment abroad scheme after me, using the same process, and that's brilliant. It's great that it's being funded, but we need to look at our local services, and we need to look at how they're funded. And I'm in a cochlear implant collaborative network of patients globally, and friends in New Zealand managed to triple the funding of their cochlear implant programs by lobbying government between election cycles. So that's something that's in our sights, and we would be hopeful that in time there'd be enhanced capacity in Ireland. And I know significant associations between this college and what's happened with cochlear implants in the last 15, 20, 30 years, and successes around getting bilateral implants for children, I suppose we need to extend that now and extend capacity. So I need to take some time off. I need to focus on getting the best possible outcome from that opportunity to get the implant. So I'd had my brain pickled by severe tinnitus for a year. So I took a chunk of time off work, and I walked and I wrote the blog, I wrote some historical fiction, and I spent hours and hours a day doing auditory rehab. So trying to hear the difference between dig and gig, and get into the stage where your scores for specific consonants or specific vowels were up at the level where I'd be happy to go back to work, and where I wouldn't be wondering, was I hearing things, or wouldn't have my professional credibility questioned. So there was an extensive period spent on that, and the legs walked off the poor dog. We were up and down Dollymount Strand a lot. So I got to the stage where the blog was up to date. I documented everything in the blog, and work was in the sidelines. So I needed to prepare for back to work. I was going to do a little bit of writing before that. I was going to do a bit of training. So at the time as well, I started to get out to gigs. This is the first gig where I got connected to the sound system. So I don't have to listen to all the audience noise. I get the feed direct from the sound desk. CMAT herself responded to the message, could you help me straight away? Hi, yeah, of course we can. We'll sort you out. And that's the sound engineer, Canis, who helped me in the Olympia, back playing songs and sessions with my daughter, Shauna. And back here, before going back to work, was a big international conference organised for the European Network of Teratology Information Services, and the first kind of professional use of the implant. So in anticipation of getting back to work, went into National Library of Ireland on Culture Night, September 23. Myself and the kids were waiting for my wife to come, and while we were waiting, I filled in the reader's ticket application form. And I had a bit of time. I thought I'll never have the opportunity again. So why don't I get ready to go back to work? I'm walking in and out of the Rotunda, get into training, walk in and out of the National Library of Ireland every day, do a few hours research, get back home before the youngest gets home from school, re-engage my brain, practice for return. So I set to it, went into National Library of Ireland. I used the skills that I learned here. So I was on the Sphere PhD program, or the HRB PhD Scholars program here in RCSI that Hannah and colleagues set up. I was the first pancake to come out of that program. So they made all their mistakes with me. But they taught me about systematic review techniques. And it's something that I use in work every day. And I applied it in this setting. So I wanted to find everything I could about Bram Stoker in the British newspaper archives. So I've been researching Bram Stoker and reading everything I could find about him, by him and about him for about 10 years at this point. And I used open source software then called Zotero to track everything I did. I just worked systematically through the search results. So searched the British newspaper archives, 2,775 results for Bram Stoker up to the end of the 19th century. And you can see there, I'm just tracking each day, and each hour across the days, the articles that I got to, reviewed them, looking for new stuff, looking for world building, like how do you write something that feels real about the life that he would have lived and the people around him at that time. And you start to see him emerging in society. So there's a smattering of articles where he was listed as he was at a Lyceum event. So he's moved from Dublin to London. He's now the right-hand man of Henry Irving, one of the most famous actors of the day. And Bram is there in the list of attendees at the 100th show for the Merchant of Venice, I think. And there's a big party, and Bram was one of the attendees. And then we start to see him moving up the ranks, and himself and Florence's name start in various places. They're on the Kingstown Royal Mail steamers departure list. They were back and forth between London and Dublin. They were visiting Thornley. They were good friends with Thornley. You see that Bram met Gladstone backstage at the Lyceum in 1881, and they maintained friendship for years later. And Bram was there when he was introducing the Home Rule Bill 5 or 6 years later. And you can see how he went up in society. So from the social pages and the parties that they attended, the theatre, the gallery events, Bram attempted a rescue on a drowning man in the Thames. All of this was covered in great detail. So he was quite celebrated. In that time, then I came across some short stories. So I saw the reviews of his book Under the Sunset, a children's story collection. I found the Dualitists. So I was like, I haven't heard of this. Is this new? No, it's not new. It's out there. Everyone knows about it. You just hadn't seen it before. So found the Dualist short story, pretty weird short story, and then another one called Our New House. And again, is this something new? No, it's not. Everyone knows about it. You just hadn't found it. So kept going through the process. Bram starts setting off to America on US tours with the Lyceum. They're going out around the provinces, big homecoming nights, massive first night gala performances in London, and everyone in high society wants to be there. And Bram's the guy, you know, that controls who comes to the after party. So he was very powerful. He's performing logistical miracles to move the entire company around the country, to move them over to the States, to go all across the States and Canada, and, you know, organizing all the necessaries of that perpetual touring. We start to see Florence as well at this time. So she's appearing in the Girls' Gossip and Ladies' Columns, mostly as the most beautiful woman there, or the best dressed woman. There was some snipe who pointed out that she wore the same outfit twice as well in one of the articles. And I think that's linked to the next part of the story. So she was very heavily featured in 1887 when she went through her own, or the family's personal horror story, where the Victoria, the steamer that herself and her son Noel and Noel's governess, they were heading over to Paris, I think on a shopping trip, so she wouldn't wear the same outfit twice. And the steamer went down near the coast of France. So there's descriptions of Bram going from newspaper office to newspaper office, trying to find out what's happened to them and trying to get news. Eventually the next day found out that they had gotten away on a lifeboat and that they were safe. They'd drifted overnight. They came into shore, and Florence just kept going on her journey, went down to Paris. So yeah, their own personal horror story might have coloured things in the future, and how we represented shipwrecks as well in some in Dracula and elsewhere. So on to August 1890 then, Florence, Bram and Master Noel are on the visitors list in 6 Royal Crescent in Whitby. So they're on their summer holidays. The list of everyone who's on holidays in Whitby is in the newspapers. So this was their social media at the time. And they're on holidays, and Bram is diligently writing away. So he started plotting Dracula about 6 months earlier. He is working on his holidays. He finds the name Dracula on that holiday in the library in Whitby. So he's looking through some library books, finds Dracula, writes it down multiple times in his notes, and these notes are still extant. You can view them over in a museum in the US, and you know, Dracula took off from there. So let's go forward a couple of weeks. He's back in London, back from the summer holidays. The season is starting again, and there's a big opening night. And these are sketches from The Gentlewoman. So Bram Stoker, MA, which is how he styled himself at the time. He's presented as Master of Arts and Graces on the first step of the big staircase in the Lyceum. And he's there on opening night, and he's got significant sway. He's the person who says, "You're coming around after." He touches people on the arm as they walk up the stairs and tells them, you know, come back to the backstage party later on. Poor Oscar then is depicted as a more rotund character. So this is Oscar Wilde on the right, and he's puffing on a cigarette at one of the wall-mounted rubber gas lighter tubes, which was news to me that these things existed, and it's no wonder theatres went on fire. So that's September 1890. A few weeks later, then October 1890, Bram is down visiting Alfred Lord Tennyson with Henry Irving. And, you know, they're out walking and talking with Tennyson. He's a massive fan of Tennyson's. And Tennyson's house was quite near Gibbet Hill. And the description in the story of the time of year and, you know, what he would have seen coming and going from Tennyson's house aligns quite closely with what ended up in the book. So my searches went on past that time period. I saw, you know, The Snake's Pass. So Bram's only novel set in Ireland was released around that time. And as I continued my searches, I got a little bit of a shock. So I got to New Year's Day, 1891, a result from the Dublin Daily Express. So on the 12th of October, I got to this stage. So started on 25th September, 12th of October. So I didn't stumble upon it. I did say in some of the media stuff that I stumbled upon it, but I was a few weeks stumbling at that stage. So I was into my last hour that day. I had a kind of hard stop time for getting home to let my son in. And I came across this ad, so it's difficult to read. Blow it up a little bit. It's Gibbet Hill by Bram Stoker. And I was like, okay, I definitely haven't heard of this one. Maybe it's the same as the dualists or our new house. Maybe it's known, maybe it's crap. So I'll go and have a look at it. With those people with really good eyesight can see the Kinnans were selling whiskey back then. So they're selling whiskey at their wine vaults on Denzile Street. So I left my desk. I was at the desk with the little green lamps and my little laptop, and I went to one of the main NLI computers, and I searched for that edition, so the 17th of December edition of the Dublin Daily Express. And I've done this before. I'm searching for an article about the safety of a drug in pregnancy, and it really has the answer I need from what I found in the abstract. And I really need this article, and you get to the online source and they don't have it. The college doesn't have a subscription to it, or the supplement isn't there in that edition and you can't find the bloody thing. So I was hoping that this wouldn't happen. Please, 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 please let it be there. And the 17th of December edition of the paper was there. Please, please, please let the supplement be there at the end of the paper. So I'm going through the paper. There's all these adverts for businesses that are long dead. It's a Christmas edition, lots of adverts, lots of charity ads as well. And raced through the pages and got to the supplement. Happy days, they have the supplement, raced through the supplement and got to this stage. Gibbet Hill by Bram Stoker, all rights reserved. And I nearly fell off the chair. I was looking around me just in case someone was looking over my shoulder. Should I shout about it and tell everyone who's in the reading room at the moment? Jesus, look what I've just found. And then I devoured it. I was against the clock because I had to get home, but devoured it, and it was way better than the other stuff. You know, it was way better than Our New House. It was way better than Dualists. I felt it was kind of like The Judge's House or The Squaw, or, you know, some of his better short ghost stories that were published around that time. And then I was like, what on earth am I going to do with this? So if someone else has discovered it and is sitting on it, you know, is that something that might have happened? Am I the only person who's discovered it? Am I the only living person to have read it? So I had loads of questions. I was fascinated by it. I banged off a text to my wife just saying, you know, look what I did today, and got the wow emoji. And so I had to figure out what to do with it. So one element was, I'll just stick it up on noisy silence and it'll drive a bit of traffic to the website and I'll raise awareness of hearing loss. And I was toying with that idea, and then I called Paul. Is Paul McKinley here? There's Paul. Called Paul and said, I was thinking of doing this, and but maybe there's something more to it. Maybe we could do something bigger. So Paul immediately, you know, read it and saw the value of it from a imagery perspective, that it, you know, there's so much imagery, and he straight away pitched in and said, you know, I can do artwork for this. We can produce something that'll be tangible and that'll be beautiful. We didn't have any interest in commercializing it. We felt that this is public domain, you know, but you could commercialize it for a charity. We then needed some grown-up help, so we went to Paul Murray, who's also up there. So Paul is, in my view, one of the eminent Stoker biographers, favourite of my Stoker biographies. And I was worried that myself and Paul would go to Paul Murray and he would say, this has been found, people know about it, it's out there. But we had an amazing group reading in Paul's basement with all Paul's Dracula memorabilia around us, and sure enough, this was new. So we all agreed we'd work on this pro bono. We wouldn't put money into it, we wouldn't take money out of it. We'd see if we could find someone to support the costs of producing it and getting it out there to the world. So we were really lucky to meet with the Rotunda Foundation. So it was Mary Houlihan and Sheila. Really cold November morning in Paul's studio. Paul had all the draft sketches on the walls, and we're sitting there talking them through the story, and pitching that, you know, this may be saleable, and maybe we could establish a research fund that would be directed at hearing loss research. And I don't know where there's a specific project around screening for babies who'd be vulnerable to hearing loss. There was some potential research coming out that we could do things with. And Mary and Sheila were straight away, we'll support this. You know, this is something that very much aligns with what the Rotunda Foundation want to do. And Bram's mother, Charlotte, had been an advocate for the deaf. So she was the first female member of the Dublin Statistical and Social Inquiry. She was probably inspired by Florence Nightingale, who had presented, you know, to a conference in the RDS the previous year. And 1863, Charlotte Stoker is the first female associate member, the first woman to present to the society, and she presents on the necessity of state provision for the education of deaf children. So pitched to the Rotunda Foundation, I think this should be called the Charlotte Stoker Fund, and I think it very much aligns with, you know, I think it's where we should be heading. So Paul and myself and the Rotunda Foundation, you know, got help from a lot of different people and getting it to the stage where we could produce a book. So we got Catherine the Great on board. Catherine Goff was our editor and someone ex-publishing industry, because there's a publishing industry there for a reason. It's hard, and to turn it from an idea into a book is a lot of work and it's expensive. And Catherine guided us through all of that. And then we found our friends in the Dublin City Council Bram Stoker Festival, who we wrote to them. We missed the deadline and we said, we've something that we think might be interesting for the festival. And they had a suitable reaction to that, and were incredible supporters, and just got us to the stage where, you know, we could publish it with a bang. And we got to this stage then where Sarah McCoy, the graphic designer, designed our cover, which was very enticing and grabbed the eye. But we had to turn it from the proofs and the drafts and the copy editing and the proofreading and what color do you want the cover and what design, and all of those decisions and all of those lunch breaks spent on those calls to get us to this stage where we had something physical that my dog Snowy could tower over. So it took a lot of work to get from there to here. There were wobbles along the way. I was constantly fearful that the foundation were supporting this, and what if someone else publishes it in the meantime? It's there, it's for the finding. There was a book called The Forgotten Writing of Bram Stoker that I had bought years earlier, and that was the result of someone going out and systematically searching through these archives. So surely someone else is doing this. If we went the traditional publishing route, we'd take another year and someone would publish it in the meantime, and the foundation would be down that cash. And also the traditional publishing route is very different from independent publishing, where there's a significant proportion of the sales that go direct to the charity when the charity are publishing it themselves, as opposed to traditional publishing model. So we seem to get lucky. There were a few wrinkles. We had a stellar endorsement of the book from someone who got cancelled, you know, shortly before we were about to go to print. Someone who rightly got cancelled. So the amazing John Connolly stepped in and gave us an amazing blurb quote. But that lost us a lot of opportunities of exposure from, you know, someone who's major literary star. So we're really thankful for people like John Connolly, people like Roddy Doyle stepped in and gave us a really nice forward and told their own personal experience of hearing loss. So we're getting up to the Bram Stoker Festival, we're getting up to launching it, and we get communication that there has been a scholar working in this area, that this scholar had discovered Gibbet Hill in 2016, and that it was in a production process towards a publication. And at this stage, a lot of stress for the Bram Stoker team, for ourselves and for the foundation, because the train had left the station. We were doing interviews, we had media plans, you know, this was all happening, and we couldn't stop it at that stage. So we just pressed on and waited to hear from the scholar, sent them a communication. So the next few weeks, complete blur. I knew there was 15 minutes of micro fame coming, that it wouldn't last. And I just tried to figure out how could you spend that exposure wisely to do some advocacy work and to leave some kind of a long tail of book sales and of print sales that ultimately go into the Charlotte Stoker Fund. So we made the 6-1 news. and I was referred to after Bram Stoker as a fellow Dubliner. So yeah. So, I had a little bit of work to do to get over that and to be able to go to a pub in Tuam again at some point. But listen, the response was just amazing. The Irish Times, a load of global coverage, man hanging out in the library on break from work. Made it into hot press. This is a highlight. This is Leo Moran from the Saw Doctors, who wrote it in 17. So I can't see it. I think it says something like, I can't believe it was one of the Clearys. So something like that. And to make the banner bar of the Tuam Herald as well was a big deal. And basically, all jokes aside, it was a very positive experience. And, you know, for all the people that supported along the way, for it to culminate in an event within the Bram Stoker Festival, in the Pillar Room, you know, facilitated by the Rotunda Foundation. Got amazing support from Miriam O'Callaghan, who came in and supported us and emceed the event. And Eileen Walsh did the first live reading of the story. It took about half an hour, complete silence, including from the smaller children who were there. And you could hear a pin drop, and it was just spectacular. It was like reading it again for the first time in the reading room in the National Library of Ireland. And Paul's works were on display. We had a beautiful introduction from my colleague Breda Hayes, consultant neonatologist, and she talked about the experience of, you know, looking after these very premature babies, seeing them in the clinic afterwards, and the fact that among the most premature, the rate of hearing loss can be up to 10%. So are there potential things that we can do to drop that? You know, there are known causes of hearing loss. There are probably unknown combinations of factors that lead to hearing loss, some of which might be preventable. So that's what we're trying to go after with the funding coming into the Charlotte Stoker Fund. We are at the stage where the first project is kicking off. So I just got the ethics approval letter this week for this research project. We're going through the logistics of how we implement it, but it's essentially called the Aishtagi project. So we're going to use a recently CE marked medical test that looks at a specific genetic variant that's in about 2 to 4 babies per thousand. And that genetic variant means that if we give them an antibiotic that we use all the time, we give it to maybe 1,000 to 1,200 babies a year in the Rotunda, and you can scale that up for use across the country. So these babies with this genetic variant, if you give them this antibiotic, which they need, you know, for sepsis, which could be fatal, they need an antibiotic, but this particular one is quite likely to cause hearing loss in those babies because they have a particular vulnerability to it. So this test is available. It's starting, you know, there's initial promising results from the UK. The Scottish government decided to roll it out nationally in the past couple of months. And the funding from what we brought in from the book is enabling us to get off the ground with the first year in the Rotunda. We have 2 other sites now who want to come on board and see can they self-fund implementing it. And that then could get to a stage where the National Women and Infants Health Programme and the HSE look at it from a national perspective and see, is it feasible from our initial work? What was our experience of that initial implementation? Did parents consent to the test? And if it is scaled out nationally then, and it is rolled out nationally like Scotland, they'll find 15 to 20 babies a year who have the genetic variant, who would have gotten gentamicin. We don't know, would they all have gone deaf? We don't know, would they all have gotten some degree of hearing loss, a little bit, a lot? We don't know. Those studies aren't done, can't be done. But we can reduce the risk of hearing loss. And I'm amazed that this all worked and that I'm standing here and that all the people that contributed produced this beautiful book. Paul McKinley produced the amazing artworks, which I'll pop up for the Q&A. I got to the stage of the process. I can't believe it. I can't believe it worked. So this was some of the street art that was across the road from the hotel in Berlin when I was activated. And I suppose it's not my natural inclination to be up here telling people about, you know, my medical history or, you know, my family's experiences. but I'm happy to tell the story publicly over such an extended period of time, and being a pain for promoting the book, because it is painful. You do have to promote it all the time and be that boring person on social media who's always looking for an opportunity to promote it. But essentially, if all these efforts help, one person, then the whole thing is worthwhile. So we're pretty much at my time now. I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions and discussion. I didn't talk about Thornley. Thornley and Bram were good friends. They were over and back a lot. Paul has some interesting stuff in the book. I've read interesting snippets here and there. I think there was a request for help from Thornley when Bram and Florence were in more straitened times later in his life, and I'm not sure that all that help was forthcoming. There was a little bit of schadenfreude at some of the stories of events in Ely Place. Thornley's wife had mental illness, and there was some events that an Irish writer wrote about in public, and it caused some scandal. And I think there was a certain degree of schadenfreude in the Bram Stoker side of the family. Paul might elucidate on that. And then other stuff, like they were very interested, they were very liberal people. Bram, had promoted a lot of liberal causes. Thornley supported, the first proposals around female members of the college. So they were an interesting family, and it's great to be here to give this speech. And the final little nugget, I just wasn't able to squeeze into the talk, and something that if I ever get time off from work again, that I'll do more work on. Bram was in Inner Temple in London with Gandhi. So they were both overlapping by about 2 years. There's gaps in both their personal diaries, and Bram's and Gandhi had 120 pages from his London Times, 20 are extant. But they were definitely in Inner Temple together. They had to go to a certain number of meals or commons to get called to the bar ultimately. Bram got called to the bar before Gandhi. Gandhi in 1931 or 32, when he was back to London for negotiations, talked about how much he loved the Lyceum. He loved going to the theatre, so he loved going to Bram's theatre, and his favourite actress was Ellen Terry, who was one of Bram's best friends. So I think there's amazing associations out there. There's a lot more work to be done on this, and I think pretty amazing stories will come out. So thank you for listening. I'll pop up Paul's images, and we have plenty of time for questions.